Andy Linda Chapman, you'll have to tell us that later, is a licensed RN and also a certified dementia practitioner. And I also see that you're a trainer for the National Council of Certified Alzheimer's Disease and Dementia Practitioners. She is a clinical liaison educator with Heart to Heart Hospice and consultant with Select Med seminars and consulting, providing in-services on a variety of topics and CEU programs to facilities for residents, families, direct care workers, and healthcare staff. In recent years, she has developed and presided over a successful hospice program in her home state of Michigan and is currently serving on the MHHA Education Committee for Hospice and Palliative Care Services. Andy has a passion for education and a zeal for life, even in these interesting times today. Her philosophy is simple, and I loved your philosophy, Andy. Life hands us many experiences, and that adversity is a great teacher. Knowledge is indeed power in our lives, but as it empowers us, it also requires that we do what is right and good for others. Through personal trials and experiences, much has been learned, and it is a joy and an honor to share the knowledge gained. I welcome you to Savvy Seniors, and we look forward to hearing your message for hope and healing. Thank you for coming, Andy.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I just give you a real quick, Andy came about as my stepfather died in a car accident. And I was actually singing professionally with the Grand Ole Opry and some of the stars there. And so I took his name as my stage name, and it just kind of stuck. So that's where Andy came from. When I hear Linda, it's usually when my husband's angry with me or I'm in court. So, but today we're going to be talking about something that I think is really important, and that is grief and that overwhelming sadness that so many people are experiencing right now. And it is important to note that this is the biggest organ that we have that controls our emotions. Now, there are a lot of things that come at us from different directions, but it's how we choose to deal with it that actually impacts not only our emotional health, but also our physical health. So that's why I love this quote, is how we think about the future, how we hope determines how well we live our lives. And that is so true. So at this time when we're really away from other people, and that's so difficult for so many of us, it is important to note that we can work with what's going on up here. It's going to impact what's in here and overall our health. And who knows who you're going to influence along the way. So now we have the holidays, and it's okay to be sad. We're separated from people we love. I know there's a meme going around on Facebook that's rather amusing, but it's sad at the same time because indoor gatherings are limited to X number of people. And the meme is the police breaking down the door because they found out you have a turkey that's fit for 12 to 14. The limit is 10. So that has been kind of funny, but yet again, isn't it very sad? So when we're thinking about the sadness, it really is healthier than the denial that we have. And it is very similar, but it's not the same as the holiday blues. Sometimes we're going through this now together during the holiday season, and this is when it's going to kind of increase in what we're experiencing. Now, don't let anyone tell you how to feel. That is the first thing. You are going to feel how you feel based on your experiences and on all these things, but you know, they're going to tell you how they feel about certain things, and they're going to feel passionate, and maybe they're trying to help you, but don't let them tell you how to feel, because you are a unique individual. But if you're feeling to the point where it's impacting your health, mental or physical or spiritual, then it's something that needs to be dealt with. Otherwise, you will suffer. You truly will. But how how you deal with that, your coping skills, that's kind of up to you, but they have to be healthy. So this is kind of a picture of what we see lately. You know, it's holiday time and people are putting the happy wreaths on their door. And here we are. This is what 2020 has been for a lot of people. But it is important that we are not alone, and we have to help others know that they are not alone. We're reaching out to individuals is very important, whether it is by email or real letter. I mean, real letter, I would love to get a real letter in the mail. Everything I get is some kind of advertisement. But, you know, those things really matter to individuals right now and help to connect us. So maybe one of the things we could do is set up a pen pal program, even within your community, and figure out who is really alone. Maybe their kids are out of state. So how can we help them? There are a lot of things that we have to deal with on our own during the holidays. Now, some people, because you have children out of state or family out of state, or maybe even in a facility, so you're separated that way, there are a lot of things that we have to handle on our own. And right now, because of COVID and not having the money coming in, not being able to go out and go shopping, it is important for us to be able to say that I don't have enough money to buy these gifts, but I would like to offer my services to shovel your snow off your sidewalk or whatever. But, you know, admitting sometimes that we don't have the ability or the savvy to do online shopping, there's no set or no, what's the word? Dear, I'm a certified dementia practitioner. I can't come up with it. But there's no shame in admitting that we have a problem with finances. We also have a lot of stress because we're trying to plan these family dinners and maybe we can't have all the family in. Now, who do you say? Well, you know, we've got 12 people in the family. Well, two of you can't come? So, you know, so that we're stuck with that emotional stress as well. And then, of course, grief and loneliness goes along with that. And when we're over 65, this is where we start seeing that loneliness and grief kind of mushroom into a bigger problem called depression. Depression is not a normal part of aging. It is something that happens to a lot of people, especially right now. And then, of course, if you're trying to please everybody, you're not going to be able to do that. And SAD is seasonal affective disorder. And many people during this time of year are going to have that because we have less sunlight. And if you have less sunlight, it definitely does impact the moods. And it's really interesting that we have more gloomy weather and we start seeing people that are becoming more sad. But that is what it is, seasonal affective disorder. And this actually puts you at much, much higher risk for depression and, believe it or not, heart disease. Heart disease is coming about because when we're sad, we're releasing a neurochemical called cortisol. Cortisol is not your friend, not at all. And it's definitely not your heart's friend. And so this is why we start seeing some of those things get worse, especially during the winter time or going into the winter time because of that lack of sun. It's kind of interesting. Now, I had foot surgery and was actually sitting in a chair for about 8 weeks, could not get upstairs to even go to my bed. And our daughters bought me one of those light lamps, and it really did make a difference. But thing was so bright, sometimes it was too difficult to have it on. But I really think that did help. But what does, you know, we hear, well, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Well, sometimes life gives you a cactus. And when we are dealing with our problems all the time, you know, some of us can relate to this because sometimes I get really excited about a good or potential opportunity. And sometimes I'll say, well, wait a minute, I've got the COVID thing, and, now I can't go here or I can't go there. Why is this happening to me? You know what? We end up wasting time when we start thinking about the negatives or the could have beens or the should have beens or all of those things. Sometimes we have to change our mindset so that we can think outside the box. And by thinking outside that box, we start thinking about bigger and better possible outcomes. So it's what goes on in here. It really is. So we have a lot of blessings, and sometimes we think about that cactus more than our blessings. So how can we cope? I'm actually going to send to Marianne several handouts. One of these handouts is put out by therapeutic-aid.com, and it's on coping skills, dealing with anxiety, how to breathe, relaxation things, and a gratitude journal. This is how we can cope. Make plans. So you can't have everybody over. Okay, maybe you're going to have a smaller dinner. So what? Enjoy it. Sometimes those smaller groups are even better because you get more time to visit with one another. And again, it goes back to the financial thing. Shop for who you feel that you want to shop for. You aren't obligated to do any gifts for anybody that you don't want to or cannot do. And I went into a store one day and I heard a couple women talking, and this one woman said, well, I have to buy something for Aunt so-and-so because I know she's going to get me a gift. Oh, I don't like that woman. And I thought, that's the wrong spirit. I didn't say anything to her, but I felt bad for her because she was not enjoying what she could have been enjoying. So, and asking for things when we need help. Right about now, sometimes we do need help. And especially if you're an older person or shut in, we need to ask for help. It might be something simple like, could you take my trash cans out to the curb on trash day for me? Or, I'm having a little extra soup that I made and I'd like to share it with someone down the street. Would you mind sending your daughter or your son to come and pick it up and take it down there? It's little things like that. And then we have to also remember that nobody's perfect. This has been a real trying time for everyone. And I have heard a lot of very negative comments about those that cannot wear a mask or do not wear a mask. We judge, and we should not judge people. Remember that we don't know what's going on inside of them, and perhaps they can't wear that mask. Don't judge them. Give them more than 6 feet. That's okay too. Also, we need to take a rest, because when we're not resting our body physically, or we're not resting our mind thinking on better things, it is definitely going to impact us. So it's okay. And give yourself time to grieve. It is so important that we don't bury those feelings, because when we bury those feelings or we don't talk about them with somebody who can help not only make sense of them, give us that opportunity to vent a little bit, but maybe they can help us get through something. It's okay to grieve. Now, what does depression look like? This is really an important issue because remember I said depression is not a normal part of aging, but it is something that happens to us. It's happening to our children. This is something that's very treatable, and it does go back to our coping skills. But what are the signs of depression? Those signs of depression are actually things like more fatigue. You're not having the usual interest that you would have in some of the activities that you normally took part in, or perhaps you're a little bit more irritable. Those are all things that are saying, I'm not coping with something very well. And if we have these symptoms, that would continue on for several weeks. Maybe it's time to talk to somebody who is a little bit more versed in it, a therapist. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you're going to get locked up. It means that you recognize that there's something wrong and you're trying to work with it. And this is very, very beneficial. Sometimes just talking to somebody and getting those holiday blues out actually helps you, because those things tend to be temporary, but if we don't deal with them, they can actually get a little bit more deep-seated. So please be very mindful that it is not a situation where you have to be embarrassed. We all go through it. And one of the big things is that it's really important to stay away from some of those things like social media. For those that want to unmute, I would like to have you answer a question. I am stuck on. Anybody know what the next line is?
Band-Aids, because they're stuck on me.
Hey, yes, absolutely. How about this one? There's a woman in a bathtub and she puts her bath soaps in there and there's traffic and dogs barking and babies. And she's saying, "Take me away."
Cow gun.
And do you know what? That actually was not the tag that they were looking for. It was really very interesting. But when you think about what social media does to us, it changes our mind. It changes how our mind actually works. And so social media has been a huge thing. By the way, Calgon, that came about in 1978. So I thought that was it. Oh, and I love this one too. Please don't squeeze
The Sherman.
Mr. Whipple. That was in the early 1970s. But
I really feel old.
so do I. I'm right there with you. But that's okay. But that's the whole point. You see, it changes our minds. And I know my husband is a news junkie. And we sat down the other night and I said, you know what? I don't want to argue about this, but I want to tell you that every time you read something negative to me and you get all excited about it and everything, it takes me to a very bad place. I don't choose to go to that bad place. I don't want to hear it. Occasionally, listening to the news is important, but even then you have to make sure that you're listening to reputable sources. And there is a lot of garbage that we're seeing on Facebook and Twitter and all of these other social media platforms. It is a great way to say hello to individuals, but don't get sucked into the negativity that is there, because it's definitely there. Now, one of the things that I've had to do is to stop responding to something that would get my blood boiling. It wasn't taking me to a good place. So you know what I do? I go ahead and I write my comment, and I don't care how caustic it is, and then I delete it. Now it's out of my system. And sometimes we have to deal with things like that to get it out of our system. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to get mad. It's not okay to let it fester and brew within you. So sometimes staying away from this is very important, and more connecting to individuals and talking with people. This is important too. The whole point is that social media does condition your brain. When you happen to get onto social media, or you during a Google search even, this was fascinating because they set up algorithms. And an algorithm is something that says, okay, you look at this, so now you're going to be interested in this and this and this. And a great point was my husband and I are looking at flooring. And I thought, well, I'll look at some of that composite vinyl and, see what that looks like. Now I'm getting ads all the time about different vinyl surfaces. I'm getting it on Facebook. I'm getting it on my Google searches. It is coming in because they know they're paying attention to what you have going on. So what happens here? How does this condition your brain? You see, we have these neural pathways that are very similar to a roadmap. And so when you're taking a roadmap to your destination, eventually you don't even have to think about it. You know how to drive to your destination. Well, that is kind of like a neural pathway. It's a second nature that goes on. And so the essence of our habits are actually conditioning our brain to thinking, to feeling, and even to acting. And so we have to be very mindful that when we're putting a negative algorithm together, it is going to impact, it's going to change our brain, it's going to change how we think, it's going to change how we feel. And sometimes it's easy to get sucked into that. Please, please, please. Social media takes a toll on people's mental health because sometimes they're not maybe going down these little rabbit holes, but they're seeing their friends say, oh, I did this trip, or I got this house, or I got this new car, and you can't do that. Is that putting you into a negative tailspin? Truthfully, one of the things that I don't like is I don't like seeing what everybody had for dinner. I don't really care. So that's kind of annoying to me, but that's my own little pet peeve. Now, psychologists actually describe human behaviors in terms of nurture or nature, but algorithms do that too. They have algorithms that are going to nurture you, or they're going to take you down different rabbit holes. So be very, very mindful. Every brain works in a very unique way. And the physical activity benefits mental health way more than just sitting there going through the scrolling thing. The brain needs chemicals like endorphins that are released through exercise and movement. So, you know, that program that they have there for the Annette is the you that runs that exercise program. I mean, that's huge. Take part in that. And remember that your brain has emotional triggers. This is very interesting because this is the brain of somebody who had used excessive amounts of social media. And they actually looked at this person's brain and they did this MRI of it. So what I found was very interesting because this is almost a self-perpetuating thing. And this is how social media can definitely impact that brain. So some people are using social media as a substitute for real life, but here's what's happening. Look at how that brain on the left is so bright and vivid and so many places that are activated. Whereas when the brain is depressed, so much more is shut down. What is this doing to your physical health? And what is it doing to your emotional health? So when we get together or even talking with people, one of the things that I think is very fun is to ask people not to just tell their stories about the funniest thing that happened at the last gathering that they were at, but write it down. This journaling is very important. Journaling actually brings people out of a lot of depression. But it also, when we're smiling, we're healing. And when we're smiling, we can get through some of the even dark days that we're dealing with right now. So we're going to talk about coping tips. And so beyond spirituality, you can turn to activities and hobbies, those things that really help you. Maybe volunteering. It's more difficult to get out and do any volunteering, but you know, we have neighbors. Can we do something for them? Maybe we can do some writing for somebody who has vision issues and would like to have a letter written. Or perhaps we can read to someone who has vision issues. And we can do that maybe through a Zoom or through telephone. Just talk to them. So these are things that we can do to help us overcome some of this stuff. But you have to keep your mind working and you have to keep your mind focused. Otherwise, we're going to deal with a lot of the things that you see here on that screen. when we have happiness in our life, it is dependent on the happiness or the quality of our thoughts. It is very possible. So one of those things is your journal, and I will send you also this gratitude journal. So that'll be one of the great handouts that you can have. And you can make several copies of it, or don't have to make copies, just get a little notebook and start putting a heading at the top and make your own journal. But it is important that we remember the good things that are around us. Very important. Sometimes in the daily routine, we have a tendency to focus on negatives or just how redundant this is. I do the same thing every day. And it is important to remember our blessings and list each one of them, no matter how small. So don't take anything for granted in this respect, because sometimes the best things in our lives are right there in front of our face and we still can't see them. So stop being blind to the positives and make sure that we're being that positive light to other individuals too. You are a person, and our brains have made us very resilient. And resilience is one of these things that, if you take something and you squeeze it and then you let it go, something like one of the stress balls, it will return to its original shape. I have a brain that I squeeze every now and then. But this is kind of how we are. Life is squeezing us, but depending on what we have inside of us and how we decide to take life on, are we returning back to shape? And actually, are we getting better? So only you can determine what is going on in your life and making it a very positive thing for you. Our body and brains are going to move through a continuum. And this continuum is definitely going to have what we call a somatic threshold, meaning that we feel inside what's happening to our bodies. And that is sometimes based on conscious thoughts. It is based mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And, I say spiritually because really it is an important thing to remember the spiritual nature of who we are as well, and stay in touch, even though maybe we can't get to services or something, but stay in touch with our spiritual base. Don't lose that. So one of the things I loved the fact that Eleanor Roosevelt, she was giving sage advice. I mean, here's a woman who was a model actually of resilience. She had a lot of things going on. She was coping with the hardships of the Depression. Her husband was unfaithful, and here he is, the president of the United States. So it was very, very public. And then, of course, they had the tragedies of World War II. And she said that it was the anxiety of all of that that helped her to grow. And she said, so do one thing every day that scares you. So create your own meaning in life. So by doing one thing that scares you every day, I would think about maybe apologize to someone that we said something about, or we didn't keep a promise to. That's hard to do. How about creating a budget right now and trying to stay within that budget, especially now going into the holidays? You can even do something that scares you, like going into the attic and finding out what's in there. For us, it's the basement. Ugh. But the important thing to remember is that people are people. And there are going to be a lot of people that are going to criticize everything that's going on. They've all got an opinion about masks. They all have an opinion about COVID. They all have an opinion about everything. And they have an opinion about what you should do. There are people that will talk about how they're going to take charge of their life and what they're going to do to change things. But look at the doer line. You are the only person who can make sure that you are in that line. It takes a lot of not only resilience, but you've got to stand tall. And sometimes that means that we're going to have to stand together because nobody likes to stand alone. And that's perfectly normal. But do something. Do something to change what is a negative in your life. And going through that grief process is definitely one of those things. You do have to make a choice. And when those difficult times are there, it is important to note that gratitude is a prerequisite. It truly is for fulfillment in life. And focusing on what we have, again, focusing on how we can help another individual. By taking that focus off of ourselves, sometimes we can actually help another individual to stand a little bit stronger, a little bit taller. We can make sense of some of the difficulties that we're going through right now, and we can help others make sense of those difficulties as well. I like this because it is one of those things that helps us to remember, one of the first things that when we first went into the lockdown, I am by nature a very gregarious, very effervescent person. And I think of myself as fairly positive, but it was a true transition for me to be at home all the time. And I caught myself using the phrase stuck at home. And when I realized that how blessed I was to have a home, how blessed I was to have the internet that I can reach out and communicate with people like yourselves, this is an important thing because sometimes we tend to forget what we have. And there are other people who would love to have what we have. So I have just a couple more things that I want to go through. And one of them, actually, I think is very timely right now because there's a lot of confusion about what is happening. We are in the cold and flu season. And there are a lot of people that are just terrified and they believe that, no matter what they have, it's always COVID and it's always going to mean death. And that is not the case. I firmly believe that I had COVID in December of 2019 before they understood what it was. And hopefully I have some immunity as a result of having that, but we've had viruses forever. When we look at the COVID virus and we see all of these things, and I'm thankful that you're going to have these slides that are going to be sent to you, because it's really important that the next two slides you recognize and maybe even write these things down or cut them out of the slides and put them on your wall or something. But here are the symptoms of COVID: fever, chills, coughs, fatigue, muscle ache, headache, sore throat, congestion, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. What does that sound like? Any other time we would say that was the flu, and it's true. However, we have with COVID a little bit more difficulty because this is a respiratory virus. And so we're going to have that shortness of breath or difficulty breathing. Does that mean run to the hospital? No. If you are having problems like that, do different things. A suck of peppermint, believe it or not, that will help to open up your breathing passages. And sometimes it's something that we have to get through. But if you're having chest pain and a great deal of difficulty, by all means, go to the doctor. Nobody's telling you don't go. I'm just saying, if you rush in, we have hospitals right now that people are coming into the ER and they're sending them home because it is not, well, the media's done a good job of scaring people. And so yes, this is happening, but we have a greater survival rate than we do a death rate. But if you're having severe symptoms, by all means, go to the hospital. The other thing that we see with COVID is a new loss of taste or smell. Now, if you're sick with a flu or a cold, you're definitely going to have that reduced ability to have taste or smell or even appetite. But this is a new loss of it. So you can have one or many of these different symptoms, and this is something that we would call COVID. Here's the flu, however, and the flu can kill you just as dead as COVID can. So it is very important that if you are sick, stay home. You're washing your hands regularly, that you're not actively having people into your home that are sick. Wear your mask. If you're very comfortable with your mask, then great. But don't engage in risky things. So when you look through these things here, they're very, very similar. Like I said, it is just a little bit different with COVID. You're going to have two other things. Now, I'll tell you one of the things that I do. I make sure that I carry saline spray. You can buy it. It's very cheap at Meijer or any other little pharmacies. Nothing that's going to shrink the nasal passages or expand them. This is simply pure saline spray. And I use that all the time. Now, as a nurse, I would be out there all the time dealing with people who had all kinds of illnesses. And this being a respiratory illness, I want to make sure that I am washing that out of my sinuses, because when people are breathing in that virus, it tends to land up in here. And because of the warmth and the moisture in our nasal passages, it actually helps that virus to grow. So by cleaning that out, the viral particles are now going to go through my digestive system. And so I'm not going to be as concerned about it. I'm not saying that you need to use this spray like a new form of religion, because that's silly. But if you've been around somebody, like when I go to the grocery store, after I'm done with the grocery store and I get into my car, I sanitize my hands and I spray that spray, because I want anything that I might have had come through my mask when I wear them, that I want to make sure I wash it away from my sinus cavity. And so far, as a nurse, I have not had the flu, and I have not had, well, I think I had COVID, but it does help. This little guy, this is a quokka. He is perpetually happy looking. And I mean, God designed his little face to just be so pleasant. He is a little animal about the size of a cat, and its natural habitat is in Australia. They have no natural fear of humans. And everybody that sees the quokka, they just love them because they just bring happiness. Cut this picture out when you get those PowerPoint slides and put him up on your wall. If that doesn't make you smile, nothing's going to. He's just cool. This is a song that I think is very wonderful. I won't play it, but it's Joy in a Teardrop. And it reminds us, if you want to look on it, by the way, Joy in a Teardrop, you can find it on YouTube. But it's a wonderful, wonderful song. But it reminds us that even with the loss that we are experiencing, we also have joy as well. And it's looking back at those things that we had that should bring us peace and joy in the future. Even when someone has died, or even when somebody is separated from us, what did that person bring to us? So that's where the Joy in a Teardrop comes along. Remember, Joy in a Teardrop on YouTube. You can listen to that whole song. I was very privileged to be able to be at a conference where the authors of this song actually performed it live, and it was just amazing. But it's a great song, and it's very uplifting, even in times when we have that big sadness.
Well, Andy, if you send me the link, I'll make sure to email it to everyone.
Okay, very good. I will do that. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes, I have a question. What things are we to do that are the most important things to prevent dementia, and when do we start to do them?
You start now. You start now. Challenge your brain. One of the things that I firmly believe, and this was before I became a dementia practitioner, was that we need to learn something new every day. And, it's something that is going to be beneficial, even if it's just a new word that you learn, and then you use that in conversation. Because we build neural pathways through that brain. And so by keeping that brain active, we're going to, and it doesn't mean that it's going to stop dementia, but it can certainly slow things down a little bit. The other thing too is if you have poor nutrition, improve that nutrition. There are things that you should be eating for your brain. And stay away from stress, because stress, we know, is going to increase despair, anger, all of these negative emotions. And you want to keep as much positive joy juice going on in your head as possible. And it's never too late to start. Never. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But like, is there a certain age where, like, at age 21, you should be doing this? Like, for a lot of people that have heart attacks, it doesn't start, in their 50s or 60s. It's really at age 20 that you should be eating right and exercising daily and de-stressing and stuff like that.
Right. That is absolutely true. And, if we followed good health and exercise guidelines from early age, that's one of the things that we have taught our children. And, have they paid attention to it? No, they eat all kinds of junk. But by starting early, it is going to definitely improve your lot in life. If you are 55 and you've had a heart attack, it is still not too late to start. We have to take charge of our health, and that includes our not just physical health and spiritual health, but mental health as well. At no matter when, if we know that there's a problem and we don't start changing our lifestyle or our attitudes to work with that problem, then we're going to have a bigger problem. So it doesn't matter when we have an issue beginning, it is when we are going to start dealing with that issue and doing our best so we can help to slow things down if at all possible. And I want to thank you all for joining me today.